Mail-order bride hid she was a doctor. A frontier epidemic forced the town to face the truth. A quiet train rolled into the small frontier town, just as the sun began to rise over the hills. Steam drifted into the cold air, and a few townspeople gathered near the platform out of curiosity more than welcome. The town rarely received new arrivals, especially not women traveling alone. When the door opened, a young woman stepped down carefully, holding a small suitcase close to her side. Her clothes were simple but neat, and her eyes moved slowly across the unfamiliar surroundings, as if she were trying to understand everything at once without drawing attention. She had come as a mail-order bride, answering a request sent by a widowed rancher who lived on the edge of town. The rancher, Daniel, stood quietly nearby, hat in hand, unsure what to expect. He had not written many letters in his life, and the idea of marriage arranged through paper felt strange even to him. But after losing his wife years earlier, he had struggled to keep his home together while raising his young daughter alone. He had finally accepted that he needed help, not only with the ranch but with the loneliness that filled his house every evening. When their eyes met, neither of them spoke right away. The woman introduced herself gently, her voice calm and steady. She seemed thoughtful rather than shy, and she carried herself with quiet confidence that surprised Daniel. She did not ask many questions, nor did she offer long explanations about her past. She simply said she hoped to begin a new life and was grateful for the opportunity. The ride from the station to the ranch was quiet but not uncomfortable. Daniel tried to explain the town, pointing out buildings along the road, the general store, the small church, the doctor's office that looked older than most of the town itself. She listened carefully, nodding at the right moments, storing away details without interrupting. Occasionally, she glanced toward the open fields stretching toward the horizon, her expression thoughtful as if she were comparing this new world to one she had left behind. When they arrived at the ranch, Daniel's daughter, Lily, waited near the fence. She had been nervous about meeting someone new, unsure how to feel about a stranger joining their lives. But the moment the woman knelt to greet her at eye level and spoke gently, Lily's tension faded. There was something warm and patient about the newcomer, something that made people feel seen without effort. The first days passed quietly. The woman adapted quickly to ranch life, learning chores without complaint. She rose early, helped prepare meals, and cleaned with careful attention. Yet Daniel noticed small details that did not fit the image of someone completely unfamiliar with complex tasks. She organized tools efficiently, checked supplies carefully, and asked questions that suggested deeper knowledge than she admitted. Sometimes she disappeared into the small room that had been given to her and spent hours reading old books she carried in her suitcase. When Daniel accidentally saw one of the pages, it was filled with notes written in precise handwriting, but she quickly closed the book with a polite smile, changing the subject before he could ask. The townspeople reacted in different ways to her arrival. Some were welcoming, offering small gifts and polite greetings. Others watched from a distance, whispering quietly. A few women wondered why she seemed so composed and educated, while others speculated about why she had chosen a remote frontier life. She responded to everyone with kindness but kept her answers short, never sharing more than necessary. One afternoon, a neighbor injured his hand while working with tools and stopped by the ranch asking for help. Before Daniel could decide what to do, she stepped forward calmly, cleaning the wound carefully and wrapping it in clean cloth. She spoke with gentle authority, instructing the man to rest and keep the area dry. The neighbor looked surprised, thanking her repeatedly as he left. Daniel watched silently. He had expected someone who needed guidance, but instead he saw someone who moved with certainty in moments of stress. When he asked where she learned such skills, she smiled softly and said she had helped family members in the past. He sensed there was more to the story but chose not to push. As days turned into weeks, life at the ranch began to feel different. The house felt warmer, laughter returned, and Lily grew attached to her quickly. The woman listened to Lily's stories with genuine interest, encouraging her curiosity about the world. She also helped Daniel organize his work more efficiently, suggesting small changes that saved time without challenging his authority. At night, after everyone slept, she often sat alone by the window, staring into the dark fields. Her expression shifted during these moments, showing worry she hid during the day. She seemed to carry memories she was not ready to share, and sometimes she held a small pendant in her hand, as if it reminded her of someone or somewhere far away. Meanwhile, the town continued its usual routine. Markets opened, church bells rang, and people gathered for small celebrations. But whispers began to circulate about a strange illness affecting nearby settlements. Travelers mentioned fever and weakness spreading quickly among families. The news sounded distant at first, more like rumor than warning. The town's elderly doctor dismissed the stories, saying frontier life always included sickness and that there was no reason to panic. Most people agreed, trusting familiar habits more than uncertain reports. Still, the woman listened closely whenever illness was mentioned, her expression growing serious. One evening, while visiting the general store, she overheard a conversation about a ranch hand who had fallen ill with unusual symptoms. She asked a few careful questions but avoided drawing attention to her concern. On the way home, she walked faster than usual, deep in thought. At the ranch, she began quietly adjusting routines. She insisted on boiling water longer before use and encouraged frequent cleaning of shared spaces. Daniel noticed the changes, but assumed she was simply careful by nature. Lily complained playfully about washing her hands more often, but she followed instructions because she trusted her. The air itself seemed to change as winter approached. The wind carried a colder edge, and people spent more time indoors. One morning, a neighbor arrived looking worried, saying another family had become sick with similar symptoms. The illness no longer sounded distant. The woman listened silently, her hands tightening around the edge of the table. She asked specific questions about symptoms and timing, but when the neighbor asked how she knew so much, she simply said she paid attention to details. Daniel began to sense that her past held something important, something she feared revealing. Yet he also felt growing trust in her judgment. He noticed how carefully she observed everyone's health and how she reacted immediately to small signs others ignored. That night, as the wind howled outside, she sat by the fire long after the others went to bed. Her thoughts moved between past and present, between the life she had left behind and the one she was trying to build. She had come to the frontier to escape expectations and judgment, hoping to live quietly without carrying the weight of who she once was. But as reports of illness increased, she felt the old responsibility returning. She knew that if the sickness reached the town, hiding her true identity might no longer be possible. The fire burned low as she stared into the glowing embers, realizing that the peace she had hoped for might soon be replaced by a difficult choice: remain silent and protect her secret, or step forward and risk everything she had tried to leave behind. The illness did not arrive. All at once, it moved quietly, almost unnoticed at first, like a shadow that slowly grows larger without anyone realizing it. A ranch hand living outside town was the first to fall seriously ill. People assumed he had caught a strong seasonal fever, something that would pass with rest and warm soup. But days later, another family reported similar symptoms. Then another. The pattern began to feel too familiar to ignore. The mail-order bride watched everything carefully. She listened more than she spoke, paying attention to details others overlooked. When neighbors described fever, weakness, and coughing that did not improve, her expression grew more serious, though she tried to remain calm on the outside. She asked small questions that sounded harmless, but each answer added to the worry growing inside her. Daniel noticed the change. She moved through the house with more urgency, cleaning surfaces more often and insisting on fresh air whenever possible. She encouraged Lily to rest early and drink more water. When Daniel asked if something was wrong, she gave a gentle smile and said she simply wanted to keep everyone healthy. In town, fear slowly replaced curiosity. The general store grew quieter as people avoided gatherings. Conversations became tense, filled with rumors and guesses. Some blamed travelers passing through. Others believed the illness was just bad luck that would soon disappear. The elderly town doctor continued his usual methods, offering simple remedies and reassurance. He was respected because he had served the town for many years, but even he seemed unsure as more patients returned without improvement. He visited homes one after another, carrying his worn bag and tired eyes, trying to maintain confidence for the sake of others. One afternoon, Daniel and the bride visited town to pick up supplies. They noticed how quickly people stepped away when someone coughed. Windows stayed closed and laughter felt rare. A group of women whispered as they passed, glancing at the new bride with curiosity mixed with suspicion. While standing near the counter, she overheard someone mention a child who had developed a strong fever overnight. Without thinking, she turned and asked detailed questions about the symptoms. The woman describing the illness paused, surprised by her interest. Others nearby began listening too. Realizing she had drawn attention, the bride quickly softened her tone, saying she had helped care for sick relatives before. The explanation satisfied some people, but others exchanged looks that suggested they were beginning to wonder who she really was. Back at the ranch, she became even more careful. She created a small area near the entrance where boots could be cleaned and coats left outside. She explained these changes gently, never giving orders but encouraging cooperation through kindness. Lily followed her instructions happily, treating them like a game, but Daniel sensed deeper concern behind her calm behavior. Days passed, and the illness spread faster than expected. The town doctor began visiting the ranch more often, asking if anyone had noticed new symptoms or changes in the weather that might explain the sickness. During one conversation, the bride offered a few suggestions about cleanliness and isolating those who were ill. The doctor listened politely but did not fully agree, relying on traditional practices instead. Still, Daniel noticed the doctor watching her closely, as if he sensed knowledge she was not revealing. One evening, a neighbor arrived at the ranch looking exhausted. His wife had fallen sick suddenly, and he did not know what to do. The bride listened carefully, asking specific questions about her condition. She suggested keeping the patient separate from others and ensuring clean water was used for everything. The neighbor nodded, grateful for any guidance, though he did not question how she knew such things. As more people became ill, fear changed the way neighbors treated each other. Some families stopped visiting entirely. Children were told to stay indoors. The church gatherings became smaller, and even the marketplace lost its usual energy. Rumors began spreading about outsiders bringing the sickness. Because the bride was new to town, a few voices quietly suggested she might be connected to the illness somehow. These whispers did not reach her directly at first, but Daniel heard them and felt anger rise in his chest. He defended her whenever he could, reminding people how much she had helped since arriving. At the ranch, tension grew when Lily woke one morning feeling tired and warm to the touch. The bride checked her carefully, her calm mask slipping for a moment. She guided Lily back to bed and began monitoring her closely. Daniel watched her movements, precise, focused, and controlled, far more practiced than he had ever seen before. She prepared a gentle drink to help with hydration and stayed by Lily's side, counting breaths and watching every small change. When Daniel asked if he should fetch the town doctor, she paused before answering. Finally, she said yes, though her voice carried uncertainty. The doctor arrived later that day, examining Lily with his usual methods. He reassured them it seemed mild and likely would pass. The bride listened respectfully but continued her own quiet observations after he left. Lily's fever remained low, and by morning she seemed slightly better. Relief washed through the house, but the bride did not relax completely. She knew that illnesses could change quickly, and she refused to take chances. Outside, news grew worse. Several families were now seriously ill, and one elderly man had become too weak to leave his bed. Panic began spreading faster than the disease itself. Some people refused to open their doors to neighbors, while others argued over the cause of the sickness. The bride found herself caught between two worlds, wanting to help more, but afraid that stepping forward too strongly would reveal the truth she had hidden since arriving. She remembered past moments when her skills had brought criticism instead of respect. Those memories made her hesitate. One afternoon, she walked alone to the edge of the fields, breathing deeply as she tried to clear her thoughts. She knew the signs of a spreading illness. She knew what needed to be done to slow it, but revealing her full knowledge meant facing judgment she had once escaped. When she returned home, she found Daniel repairing a fence. He looked at her with quiet concern and asked gently if something was troubling her. She hesitated before answering, choosing her words carefully. She said that sometimes people hide parts of themselves because they are tired of fighting to be understood. Daniel listened without pressing further, sensing she would speak more when ready. That evening, another knock came at the door. A family arrived carrying a young child wrapped in blankets, their faces filled with fear. The child's breathing was heavy, and the fever seemed stronger than anything she had seen yet. The parents explained that the town doctor had tried everything he knew, but felt unsure how to help further. They had come to the ranch because they heard she had given good advice before. The bride stood frozen for a moment, knowing this was the moment she had feared. If she stepped forward fully, her secret would no longer remain hidden. If she stayed silent, the child might not receive the help needed in time. She looked at Daniel, who watched her with trust rather than questions. The room felt quiet except for the sound of the child's breathing. Taking a slow breath, she moved closer, her hands steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. The choice she had tried to avoid was now standing directly in front of her, and there was no more time to wait. The room felt heavy with silence as everyone watched the child struggle to breathe. The parents stood near the doorway, their faces pale with worry, while Daniel remained still, unsure what would happen next. The mail-order bride looked down at the child, and something inside her shifted. Fear and hesitation faded, replaced by a calm focus she had tried to bury since arriving in the frontier town. She gently asked the parents to place the child on the table near the window where there was more light. Her voice changed, becoming firm but still kind. She gave clear instructions: open the window slightly for fresh air, bring clean cloths, heat water, but do not let it boil over. The confidence in her tone surprised everyone, even Daniel. As she began examining the child, her movements were precise and careful. She checked breathing, felt the pulse, and listened closely to the sounds coming from the chest. She asked questions quickly but gently, gathering details about when the symptoms started and how they had changed. Each answer guided her next action. The parents watched with growing hope. They had never seen anyone work with such quiet certainty. Outside, word began spreading that something unusual was happening at the ranch. Curious neighbors gathered at a distance, whispering among themselves. Inside, she continued working through the night. She organized simple tools, cleaned surfaces repeatedly, and showed Daniel how to help without interfering. He followed her instructions without question, sensing that she knew exactly what she was doing. At one point, he noticed her hands trembling slightly, but her voice remained steady. Hours passed slowly. The child's fever remained strong, but small signs of improvement appeared. Breathing became more regular, and the tension in the child's body eased. She encouraged the parents not to lose hope and explained every step in simple language so they could understand what was happening. Near morning, the town doctor arrived after hearing rumors that the mail-order bride was treating a serious case. He entered cautiously, expecting to find chaos, but instead he saw organized care and clear structure. He watched quietly as she adjusted the child's position and checked the pulse again. The doctor's expression changed from curiosity to surprise. He realized that the methods she used were advanced compared to his own experience. After a long silence, he asked gently where she had learned such skills. The room grew still again. She paused, knowing that the moment she had avoided for weeks had finally arrived. She looked at Daniel first, then at the worried parents, and finally at the doctor. In a calm voice, she admitted the truth. Before coming to the frontier, she had trained as a physician. She had studied medicine for years, working in busy places where illness and injury were common. She explained that she had hidden this part of her life because many communities refused to accept female doctors. Past experiences had been filled with doubt and rejection, and she had grown tired of fighting simply to be heard. The doctor listened carefully, his expression thoughtful rather than angry. The parents looked shocked at first but quickly replaced surprise with gratitude, realizing that her knowledge might save their child. Outside, whispers spread rapidly as people learned the truth. Some felt relieved, believing the town now had real hope. Others felt uneasy, wondering why she had hidden such an important part of herself. Daniel remained quiet for a moment before stepping closer to her. He said softly that her actions spoke louder than any explanation. His support eased some of the tension in the room. As the morning light filled the house, the child's fever began to lower slightly. It was not a complete recovery yet, but it was enough to give everyone hope. The parents cried with relief, thanking her repeatedly. Soon more people arrived at the ranch seeking help. Some came with sick family members, others simply wanted advice. She realized that hiding was no longer possible. The epidemic had reached a point where every bit of knowledge mattered. She agreed to help the town, but she made one request: Everyone needed to follow clear instructions to prevent further spread. Clean water, proper rest, separation of those who were ill, and careful handling of shared items were essential. Some townspeople listened eagerly, while others hesitated, unsure whether to trust someone who had kept secrets. The elderly doctor surprised many by offering his support publicly. He admitted that the illness was beyond his usual experience and that working together would give the town the best chance. His acceptance helped others feel more comfortable trusting her. Over the next days, she moved constantly between homes, checking patients and teaching families how to care for their loved ones safely. She explained complex ideas in simple language so everyone could understand. Her calm presence reduced fear, replacing panic with action. Still, not everyone welcomed the change. A few people accused her of deception, saying she should have revealed the truth earlier. She listened quietly to criticism without arguing, focusing instead on helping those in need. At night, when she finally returned to the ranch, exhaustion weighed heavily on her shoulders. Daniel often prepared simple meals and encouraged her to rest, but she struggled to stop thinking about the growing number of patients. Lily watched her with admiration, telling neighbors proudly that the new bride was helping everyone. Hearing those words filled her with both warmth and sadness. Warmth because she felt accepted, sadness because she feared the acceptance might disappear once the crisis ended. One afternoon, a group of townspeople gathered outside the doctor's office, arguing about whether strict isolation rules were necessary. She stepped forward calmly, explaining that these measures were meant to protect everyone, not punish anyone. Her steady voice and clear reasoning slowly eased the tension, and most people agreed to cooperate. Days blended together as she worked tirelessly. She trained volunteers to assist with simple tasks, teaching them how to clean tools and recognize warning signs in patients. For the first time since arriving, she felt fully connected to the community, even though part of her still feared rejection. Daniel noticed how much responsibility she carried and often walked beside her during visits, offering quiet support. Their conversations grew deeper, filled with trust and understanding that had not existed before. As the epidemic continued, small improvements began appearing. Fewer new cases were reported, and some patients recovered enough to leave their beds. Hope slowly returned to the town. One evening, after a long day, she stood outside watching the sunset. The sky glowed softly, and for a moment she allowed herself to breathe without worry. She realized that hiding her identity had protected her from judgment, but also prevented her from fully living. Now that the truth was known, she felt both vulnerable and free. Behind her, Daniel approached quietly, thanking her not only for saving lives but for bringing strength back into the town. She smiled gently, unsure what the future would bring but feeling less alone than before. The epidemic was not over yet, but the town had changed. People worked together in ways they never had before, guided by someone who had once been a stranger. And as night fell, she understood that revealing the truth had not destroyed her new life. It had begun to transform it. The town felt different now. Where fear and confusion had once ruled, there was slowly growing structure and purpose. The mail-order bride, no longer hiding her knowledge, moved through the streets with steady determination. People watched her with a mix of respect and curiosity. Some still struggled to accept that she was a trained physician, but most had begun to trust her because they had seen real results. Each morning began before sunrise. She reviewed notes she had carefully written the night before, tracking symptoms and recovery progress. She understood that the illness could change quickly, and staying organized allowed her to respond faster. Daniel often woke early to prepare coffee and simple meals, making sure she had enough energy for the long day ahead. Volunteers gathered outside the small clinic that once belonged only to the elderly town doctor. Now it had become a shared space filled with activity. The doctor himself worked beside her, learning from her methods while sharing his knowledge of the community. Their partnership surprised many people. Some expected tension between them, but instead they showed mutual respect, proving that cooperation mattered more than pride. She trained helpers patiently, explaining each task in clear, simple steps. She taught them how to clean tools properly, how to recognize early warning signs, and how to comfort families without spreading fear. At first, many volunteers felt nervous, but her calm guidance helped them gain confidence. The clinic became not just a place for treatment, but a center of hope. Outside, the town had changed its daily routines. Markets operated with more space between stalls, and people greeted each other from a distance rather than gathering closely. Children played in smaller groups, supervised carefully by adults. Though these changes felt strange at first, most people accepted them because they saw improvement. Still, challenges remained. Not everyone followed the rules. A small group of residents believed the illness would disappear on its own and refused to adjust their habits. They held gatherings and ignored advice about cleanliness. She tried to speak with them gently, explaining that cooperation was necessary for everyone's safety. Some listened politely but continued their old ways. When a few members of that group later became ill, the reality of the situation reached others quickly. Instead of blaming them, she focused on helping, using the moment to encourage unity rather than division. Slowly, resistance faded as people understood the seriousness of the situation. Daniel watched her work with admiration. He noticed how she balanced firmness with kindness, never raising her voice yet still earning respect. At night, when she returned home exhausted, he encouraged her to rest, reminding her that she could not help others if she did not care for herself. Their relationship deepened through shared challenges. They spoke more openly now, discussing her past experiences and the reasons she had hidden her identity. She admitted that she had once faced harsh judgment simply for being a woman in a profession many did not expect. Moving to the frontier had been her attempt to escape constant battles, hoping to live quietly instead. Daniel listened without interrupting. He told her that the town might not be perfect, but people could learn and change, just as he had learned to see her beyond expectations. His words brought comfort she had not realized she needed. Meanwhile, Lily became one of her strongest supporters. The child followed her around the clinic when allowed, handing out clean cloths and offering smiles to nervous patients. Seeing Lily's pride reminded her why she had chosen to help despite the risk of rejection. Days turned into weeks. The number of new illnesses began to slow. Recovery stories spread through the town, lifting spirits and strengthening trust. Families who had once doubted her now thanked her openly. Some even apologized for early suspicions. Despite progress, she remained cautious. She knew that illnesses could return if people became careless too soon. She continued reminding everyone to follow safe practices, even when improvement made them feel confident. One afternoon, a traveling merchant arrived, unaware of the town's recent struggles. He brought news that other nearby settlements were still suffering from the same illness. Hearing this reminded her that their victory was fragile. She organized meetings to share what the town had learned, encouraging others to spread helpful practices beyond their borders. The elderly town doctor, who had once relied solely on tradition, began adopting many of her methods. He admitted openly that learning new approaches had been challenging but worthwhile. Their friendship grew stronger, showing the community that change did not mean losing identity. Not every day was hopeful. Some patients worsened despite everyone's efforts, and those moments weighed heavily on her heart. She spent quiet evenings reflecting on each decision, wondering if she could have done more. Daniel often found her sitting alone by the window, lost in thought, and reminded her that helping even one person made a difference. Gradually, the town's atmosphere shifted from fear to resilience. People supported one another more openly, sharing food and supplies with families still recovering. Small acts of kindness became common: a repaired fence, a delivered meal, a friendly conversation from across the street. One evening, the town gathered outdoors for the first time in weeks, standing far apart but united in spirit. The mayor spoke about the strength shown by everyone, especially the woman who had guided them through uncertainty. She felt embarrassed by the attention and tried to step back, but the crowd's gratitude was genuine. Even with growing acceptance, she wondered what would happen when the crisis ended. Would people continue to respect her as a doctor, or would old beliefs return once life felt normal again? The question lingered quietly in her mind. Late one night, she walked through the quiet streets, checking on patients who needed extra care. The sky was clear, filled with stars, and for a moment she allowed herself to feel proud. She had faced the fear she once ran from and had chosen courage instead. As she returned to the ranch, Daniel waited by the porch light. He smiled gently, asking if she felt the town was finally healing. She nodded, though she knew there was still work ahead. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the horizon slowly brighten with the first signs of morning. The epidemic had tested everyone, revealing both weakness and strength. And as the town moved closer to recovery, she realized that the journey had changed not only the community, but also herself. She no longer felt like a stranger hiding behind a new identity. She was becoming part of something larger, a town learning to grow, adapt, and trust in ways it never had before. The final weeks of the epidemic felt quieter than before, but no one allowed themselves to relax completely. The town had learned how quickly situations could change, and people remained careful even as hope grew stronger. Fewer new patients arrived at the clinic each day, and those who had once been too weak to stand began walking outside again, slowly returning to normal life. The mail-order bride continued her work with steady focus. Even though exhaustion followed her like a shadow, she refused to slow down until she was certain the danger had truly passed. Every morning she reviewed her notes, checking the progress of each patient. She spoke with families, reminding them to stay patient and careful. Her voice remained calm, but deep inside she felt a mixture of relief and uncertainty about what would come next. The town itself looked different now. Doors that had once stayed closed began opening again. Shopkeepers returned to their counters, greeting neighbors with cautious smiles. Children laughed more freely in the streets, though parents still watched them closely. The air felt lighter, as if a heavy storm had finally begun to move away. One afternoon, the elderly town doctor stood beside her as they reviewed the clinic together. He told her that the town had changed because of her courage. He admitted that when she first arrived, he had not expected to learn from someone younger or from someone who challenged his usual methods. But now, he felt grateful for the partnership they had built. His words carried sincerity, and she felt a warm sense of acceptance she had not expected to find. Despite growing respect, she still worried about her future in the town. During quiet moments, she wondered whether people would continue to value her once the crisis ended, or if they would return to old habits and expectations. She had seen communities change temporarily before, only to fall back into familiar patterns once danger faded. Daniel noticed her thoughtful mood and invited her to walk with him through the fields one evening. The sky glowed with soft colors as the sun began to set, and the land felt peaceful again. He thanked her not only for saving lives, but for bringing hope back into their home. He told her that Lily smiled more now than she had in years, and that the ranch felt alive again. She listened quietly, unsure how to respond. She admitted that she had come to the frontier hoping to disappear, to live without carrying the title of doctor. She had been tired of proving herself again and again in places where people doubted her before even giving her a chance. But the epidemic had forced her to face who she truly was. Daniel replied gently that sometimes the things people try to leave behind are the very things that make them strong. He told her that the town did not just need a doctor. It needed someone who cared deeply enough to guide others through difficult times. His words stayed with her long after the conversation ended. As days passed, the number of active cases dropped steadily. Families who had once gathered outside the clinic with fear now returned simply to say thank you. Some brought homemade food, others small handmade gifts. She accepted each gesture with humility, never seeking recognition but grateful for the kindness. One morning, the town leaders organized a gathering in the open square. People stood together at a respectful distance, celebrating the end of the epidemic. The mayor spoke about the strength shown by the community and acknowledged the role she had played. Hearing her story shared publicly felt overwhelming, and she tried to remain in the background, but the crowd insisted on expressing their gratitude. Lily stood proudly beside her, holding her hand tightly. Daniel watched from nearby, his expression filled with quiet pride. For the first time since arriving, she felt fully seen not as a stranger or outsider, but as someone who belonged. After the gathering, the elderly doctor approached her with an unexpected offer. He said he wished to step back from full-time work and believed she should take over the clinic permanently. The suggestion surprised her. She had not planned to stay, believing that once the crisis ended, she might need to move on again to avoid judgment. She asked for time to think, unsure whether she was ready to accept such responsibility. That evening, she sat alone by the window of the ranch house, watching the stars appear one by one. Memories of her past returned, moments of doubt, rejection, and loneliness. Yet now those memories felt distant compared to the warmth she felt in this town. She realized that the fear of being judged had kept her from embracing the possibility of belonging. The epidemic had revealed both her strength and the community's capacity to grow. Perhaps this place could be different from those she had left behind. The next day, she returned to the clinic and accepted the doctor's offer. The decision felt both heavy and freeing. It meant she would no longer hide who she was. It meant she would stand openly as a physician, trusting that the town would continue to support her. Life slowly returned to a new normal. The clinic remained busy, but now the work felt less urgent and more hopeful. She focused on preventive care, teaching families how to stay healthy and preparing the town for future challenges. Volunteers who had once helped during the crisis continued supporting her, creating a stronger network than before. Daniel and Lily remained by her side, offering support in ways that felt natural and unspoken. The ranch became not just a home but a place where she could rest without fear. She found joy in simple moments, shared meals, laughter, quiet evenings watching the sunset. The town itself seemed transformed. People greeted each other more warmly, remembering how cooperation had saved them. Old divisions faded, replaced by a sense of shared experience. The epidemic had tested their resilience, but it had also taught them compassion. One afternoon, a new traveler arrived in town seeking help, carrying the same nervous expression she once had when stepping off the train. She welcomed the traveler with kindness, remembering her own first day. She realized that she had become part of the town's story, just as the town had become part of hers. As the seasons changed, the frontier no longer felt like a place of escape, but a place of purpose. She walked through the streets without hiding, greeting neighbors who now trusted her completely. The secret she once carried, as a burden, had turned into a source of connection. Standing outside the clinic one evening, she watched children playing nearby and felt a quiet sense of peace. The journey from stranger to trusted healer had not been easy, but it had given her something she had long believed impossible: a home where she could be both herself and part of a community that valued her for who she truly was.